There's one thing everyone fears: the silence of the late night. When the world is asleep and all that remains is the sound of the wind and your own heartbeat. But for some people, that night wasn't just silence. It was the beginning of a real nightmare. These are true horror stories about people who were completely alone at night. Each story unfolds under the weight of darkness when there's no one left to call for help. Brace yourself, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost, but the human standing just outside your door. I was spending the week in Washington at a cabin in the Cascades. It was deep in the remote snowy wilderness, far out of the major cities, and down a long dirt road with dense forest all around. Winter was just starting, so there was a little bit of snow, but nothing too much. The first 3 days were great. It was peaceful, quiet, and relaxing. The calm atmosphere felt like complete isolation from the world. But midway through the 4th day, there was a knock at the door. I had no idea who it was or who it could have been. I walked over and opened the door as there wasn't any other way for me to see the porch. That single moment shattered the silence completely. From inside the cabin, there was a man. He had a thick winter jacket on and a black wool hat. His face was pale with red cheeks, and snow was sticking to his clothes. He'd clearly been outside for a while, maybe wandering for hours, in the freezing, lonely silence. "How can I help you?" I asked. The man gave a friendly smile and said he was just a bit lost and wanted to know the way back into town. I was confused. Was he really trying to walk the 1-hour drive through icy darkness to town in the cold and snow? And how did he even get out here in the first place? Take a left here and follow it to the main road," I said. "It's a straight shot." From there, I figured it wasn't any of my business, so I just told him what he asked for. He smiled and nodded. There was a strange pause for a few seconds as he just stood there and neither of us spoke. I got uncomfortable and said goodbye, quickly closing the door in uneasy silence. I heard his boots walk off the porch soon after. It was an interesting interaction for sure, but I went back to what I was doing and forgot about it. Not too long after several hours passed, the light snowfall from earlier had started to pick up the quiet air, growing heavier and colder, which made me a little nervous because I wasn't sure how my car would handle the dirt roads with thick snow. To keep an anxious eye on the weather, I went to the back door and pulled the curtains back so I could have a view from the living room. When I did, I was kind of startled. My heart froze instantly. There were shoe prints in the snow walking around the back of the cabin. Again, I was so far out that anyone just walking around here was very strange. It was hard to tell how fresh the prints were, though. I wasn't sure how long the snowfall had picked up for, so it could have been as long as several uneasy and terrifying hours ago. Or as soon as just a few minutes ago, in that freezing, silent forest. My mind immediately thought back to the man who came by the door earlier. Had he gone around the cabin before going up to the door? Maybe he thought the cabin might be empty and was snooping around. To find out, that would be really disturbing and unnerving. I felt increasingly uneasy and paranoid after seeing those shoe prints in the snow. It didn't help that the sun had already set too. It was too dark, cold, and lonely outside, with the wind clawing at the walls to even try to look around. I closed the curtains and went around to double-check every single door was locked tight. Locked, then turned off all the lights and went into the bedroom, feeling uneasy but trying to stay calm. There wasn't a TV in there or anything, so I just pulled up a video to watch on my laptop as I laid in bed, listening to the faint wind outside. I was trying to relax and shake the uneasy feeling I had after that strange visit earlier. It took a while, like probably an hour, before I was feeling better. The steady sound of the snow outside in the dark cabin room started to make me sleepy. I shut the laptop screen and started getting ready for bed, finally thinking the night was safe again when a knock came from the front door. I physically jumped. I stood still for a moment while I just felt my mind go blank with sudden, overwhelming fear. I stood completely still, my mind going utterly blank from the sudden fear that came over me. They knocked again. "Hey, it's me again. I'm still lost. It's cold out here. Can you please help me?" It was the man who stopped by earlier, his voice now softer, yet more disturbing. Why the hell was he still around here? I opened the bedroom door so I could listen better and looked out into the main area of the cabin. It was really dark, and the man continuously knocking was unbearably slow and deliberate, every thud echoing through the cold air. But then, after maybe 30 seconds, the knocking stopped. The wind outside felt like it picked up its howl, filling the empty silence, and it was the only thing I could hear. I really wanted to know if he left, though, or where he went. I quietly crept out into the dark, frozen main room filled with tension, which I knew had all the curtains and blinds closed, so he shouldn't be able to see me without opening the door. My only option was to look out one of the windows. It didn't have a clear view of the porch, but I could see the front of the cabin leading up to the road. I pushed the curtain aside and looked. I could see a set of footprints going up to the porch, but none leaving the snow was undisturbed. He must still be at the door. I walked back and got my trembling hands on my phone. Service was good enough to call 911. They estimated it would be about 4 or 5 long minutes before they would make it. I locked myself in the bedroom and waited. 10 minutes went by with not a single sound, which was really eerie knowing he had to be just silently standing outside the door. All I heard was the heavy wind furiously smacking against the fragile windows. Then there was a sudden thud against the cabin. I had no idea what it was, but it sounded like it came from the front of the cabin, and it was pretty loud. But then it was silent again, a silence heavier than any scream I'd ever heard. Shaking and terrified time seemed to move extremely slow every second, stretching endlessly. Eventually, red and blue lights began flashing brightly outside the windows, filling me with a wave of relief. I got up and started walking toward the front door, but suddenly heard the officer yelling with urgent panic to get down. I froze, realizing something was wrong. The officer kept shouting his voice, cutting through the night, and then that same heavy thud echoed again through the cabin walls, followed again by yelling. It turned out the guy had actually never left at all. He'd climbed onto the roof of the cabin, waiting silently above me in the freezing dark, maybe planning to strike once I felt safe again. I don't know, the officer made him get down and arrested him for trespassing. Other than that, the guy did well not to admit to trying anything. It seemed like he'd been outside circling my lonely cabin all day long, which is really disturbing. What he was really trying to do is unknown, but it likely was something truly dark and terrifying waiting to happen. It was popular in our small town, though it was a common hangout spot for local high schoolers, because the parking lot was pretty big and had several unoccupied or abandoned shops nearby, giving the area a quiet, eerie feeling at night. It was like a strip mall, except only the brightly lit ice cream shop remained open, surrounded by silent buildings and windswept pavement. Usually the crowds were gone by 10 though, and it would just be the occasional group of kids stopping by in the middle of the night when everything else around felt lifeless and empty. From 11 o'clock p.m. to 4 o'clock a.m. this night, I got in and did the usual cleaning up all the scattered mess and sticky counters the previous workers left for me. It only took about 30 minutes, so after that, I just sat back and waited. Around 1 o'clock, a group of teens came in, but other than that, it was completely dead silent and almost unnerving. Halfway through my shift, I got so bored that I decided to do some extra cleaning up around the back. I tossed a bunch of garbage out and headed outside to toss it into the dumpster. The dumpster was actually in the front of the shop, kind of on the side of the big parking lot where darkness and silence seemed endless that night. Near the other abandoned shops, under the pale streetlights and deep silence, I walked over and tossed the trash in. The night was quiet, not even any cars out driving around. As I walked back though, I noticed a sudden and faint light flicker in one of the abandoned shops. I thought it had to be a reflection of a car passing by or something, but after looking at the road and again seeing no cars, my confusion and unease grew stronger. Was I just seeing things? I walked slower, keeping my eyes on the front windows of the store and just waiting for something. Then it happened again. A light shined past the windows for only a few brief, terrifying seconds. It looked kind of like someone carefully shining a small flashlight around deep inside the back of the store. After that brief sighting though, it didn't happen again, so I really had no way to confirm anything. The only part that kind of made my heart sink with fear was that the light was in the abandoned building that was attached to the ice cream shop, so it was just on the other side of the wall where I worked. I tried to reassure myself nervously, thinking that if it was someone in there, it was probably just some kids exploring the empty building completely. Harmless, there really wasn't much else to do, aside from wait around for the rest of my shift in that eerie, empty ice cream shop. It was about 2 a.m. Now, I leaned against the counter and just stared out the front windows, while the freezing wind howled outside, spacing out when I heard something beside me. I looked at the wall, and it sounded again against the other side of the wall. It was relatively quiet, though I only noticed it because the night was completely silent. I quickly connected the dots between the sound and the light I saw in that building, and was 99% sure that someone dangerous was lurking. Inside, I thought about possibly calling the cops just to let them know, but my train of thought was interrupted when a customer walked in. It was always strange when a single customer came in the middle of the night, like with no friends or anything, especially in that eerie silence. But this guy was even more odd. He was in his 40s, and he looked very unkempt. Long, untrimmed beard, greasy hair, and a tired look all over his face. The air felt heavy and unnatural as he walked up to the counter. His stench was almost unbearable. "Welcome in. What can I give for you?" He looked at me, then at the display case, hesitating as if calculating something, then back up at me. After a few seconds of him not saying anything, he smiled, backed up, and left out the door. I whispered, "What the hell is wrong with this guy?" Under my breath, really creeped out by that encounter. It was insanely odd that along with whatever was going on in the dark, and empty abandoned building next door was making this night really unnerving. I wasn't really sure what to do though, aside from just hope. I was overthinking it and wait for my shift to end to clear my head bit and just have a break. From it all, I decided to take my lunch. Usually I just sit in the back, and I ate, but I felt like getting some fresh air and clearing my anxious thoughts under the quiet sky and getting out of that place. I grabbed my lunch bag and walked out to my car. I sat in there and ate while looking out the window. A few minutes passed. The night was still really quiet, and the light in the building was nowhere to be seen. Then I saw a faint movement near the dark corner, someone come around the corner of the shop followed by another person. I recognized the jacket being the same strange guy that came in only a few minutes ago. The other guy I hadn't seen before, but he had something shiny and threatening in his hand. I was far away, but I was reasonably certain that it was a flashlight. I felt a lump in my throat as I watched the men go into the dark, nearly silent ice cream shop and start looking around. Not like customers looking for someone to take their order, but like angry men searching for their victim with cold precision. I dialed 911, my hands shaking. The men jumped over the counter and looked in the back room, coming back out barely 10 seconds later and running out of the shop. They didn't steal anything. They were definitely looking for me. They ran around the back of the building and disappeared when the cops got there, leaving behind only fear and confusion. Were gone. One of the abandoned stores had a door busted open though, so those men definitely had been in there. What they were doing is still unknown. However, it seemed like the one guy came into the shop just to see if I was alone, then went back to get his buddy, but by chance, I happened to take my lunch in my car. If not, I don't know what would have happened. It was pure luck and terrifying coincidence combined that saved me that night. I live in a pretty old apartment, a creaky, dim place that always felt slightly haunted. It was just cheap enough for me to live alone in it, so that was the only reason I lived there. It definitely had its issues though, anyway. It had its fair share of creaking old noises and strange chills though. Anyway, this was a regular night after getting out of work. It was late, but I'd actually gotten out of work 2 hours earlier than usual. So I got home and heated up dinner, then sat on the couch to watch TV for the rest of the night. I was already extremely tired and emotionally drained and wasn't planning on staying up late. The dim lighting and the soft TV only made me more sleepy. I think I was only home for about an hour before calling in for the night. I turned off the TV, went to my bedroom, and fell asleep within 5 minutes. I didn't remember the weather that night, only the heavy quiet that made the air feel uneasy. I didn't remember the weather being windy that night, and I only mention that because a few hours later, I woke up to a slow, rhythmic creaking sound echoing through the dark apartment. The building was old, so any light wind would often make it sway and cause these echoing creaks and rumbles through the walls. But again, I didn't think it was windy out, and the creak I thought I heard wasn't the same as it usually was. As all these thoughts ran through my head, the creaking started again, and it didn't stop. It was almost in this rhythmic pattern, one creak, 1 second of silence, then another creak again, endlessly repeating in eerie precision. Again, sounding like it was from somewhere on the other side of my apartment. I got out of bed, my heart was pacing, but I still wasn't totally convinced that it wasn't the old building. I opened my bedroom door. There was a hallway that led down to the front door, and at the end, on either side, was the kitchen and living room. I looked down the hallway, as I could now hear that the creaking was coming from the left side. It took me a moment, but I started to realize the sound was moving across the floor. And by the time I noticed it getting louder, I felt an icy rush of fear crawling slowly up my spine. I couldn't even react before seeing a figure suddenly appear at the end of the hallway. My entire body tensed up and froze, but the man didn't look down at me. He walked with slow, deliberate steps, like something unnatural. They kept walking slowly across the end of the hallway. They just stared ahead, never looking down the hallway. Adrenaline pumped through me, and I moved back around the corner into my room. I didn't close the door, scared of making a sound. The creaking continued through the kitchen. A few times they stopped, and it sounded like they opened and closed a few of the cabinets before walking again. Every second felt like a lifetime, trapped in silent horror. My heart was racing even faster. How did he get in? And it had to be only a matter of time before he came walking down the hallway. Just as I was thinking this, I felt every second stretch endlessly. I saw his shadow move toward the end of the hallway, but again he walked past it. The creaking moved through the living room, and then I heard the soft, dreadful squeak of him sitting on my couch. Everything about this made no sense, making it even more horrifying. I crept over to my bed and got my phone, then texted 911. My hands were shaking uncontrollably with fear. I was still too scared to call and risk them hearing me the next 3 or 4. Those endless dark minutes were just full of tension and anxiety, knowing this guy was just on the other side of my apartment, silently waiting in the dim light, sitting on my couch, and could at any moment get up and walk into my room. But he never did. I got a text that the officers were in the building, and coming up to my door, my heart pounding uncontrollably with fear. So I gathered up my courage and sprinted down the hallway and opened the door for them. They stormed in and tackled the guy, who'd barely even gotten up from the couch, ending the night's unbearable terror instantly. I didn't recognize the man at all. Apparently, he climbed up the side of the building before anyone could notice. He had climbed up the side of the building and onto my balcony on the second story, which didn't even have a lock on the sliding door. It seems almost impossible that this wasn't a specific and carefully planned break-in at my place. But the man denied everything, said he was just trying to rob a random apartment, even though he had taken nothing and didn't even have a backpack to haul stuff in. I mean, he even sat on my couch and just waited there in complete silence, like he was waiting for something. Plus, it would have been way easier to rob a first-story unit. Part of me wonders if fate or sheer luck saved me that night, or if this man truly had some darker intention I'll never understand. Of work early. Had anything to do with this? Like, did the guy somehow know my schedule? Was that why he was sitting on the couch thinking I wasn't home yet and waiting for me? There's truly no way to know for sure, no matter how hard I think about it. I think it's the uncertainty of what the man was doing that really makes this event so disturbing. Like, would he try it again in the future, and was he really targeting me, or was I just incredibly unlucky? Even now, the thought still chills me every quiet night. I'm really hoping I don't have to come back with another story in the coming years. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. If you'd like to share your own story to be featured in an upcoming video, please email me at nighthorrorstoriesyes@gmail.com. Every story has the power to touch someone's heart, and who knows, maybe your story will be the next one told. Send it in today and let's share unforgettable moments together.